Okay, welcome back to Being Integrated. I'm Jude. Here on this channel, I try to make growth practices, meditation practices more available. So if you're new and that appeals to you, please subscribe. You could like the videos, all of that helps. Lately, I've been doing an interview series where I'm talking to people who I feel have a lot to offer, who really have something to share of value. Today, I'm interviewing Dan Doty, who I was introduced to in the context of men's work. Essentially, men getting together in a group and sharing their feelings, talking about how they really truly feel, practicing vulnerability and supporting each other in that vulnerability. Now, I've been around healing and growth type scenes for nearly 2 decades now. I've been in a lot of different therapy groups where we've gone very deep in the process together. I've been on many ayahuasca retreats. I've been on many meditation retreats. And I've met a lot of amazing people and amazing facilitators along the way. And I feel like Dan is just at the very top of the heap here. He is a remarkable facilitator. The level of healing that I have seen him facilitate is as deep as anything I've ever seen. He really brings a deep quality of presence into the work he does, and that allows people to feel truly safe to go very deep in their process. And he knows how to get it out of them. He knows how to guide them in that process. The work that I've seen him facilitate and the way that he works with groups has been very inspiring to me personally, and I really hope some of that comes through and you get inspired to be a little bit more vulnerable, to feel a bit more, to connect more with those around you. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dan Doty. Okay, so I'm very excited to introduce to everyone today someone who I very much admire and respect for the work that they do, and for always really coming through like full intensity, man. You really come through. So it's Dan Doty. So I first encountered you through the group Everyman, which you were a founder. And it's funny. So I met Tom in New York. You know Tom, right? And he's like kind of an Everyman regular, great guy. And we started talking, and he said that he wants to be facilitating men's work one day. And I was like, oh man, like I was super into that. I was reading like kind of the old guard of the men's work, Michael Mead and Robert Bly at the time. And I always felt a calling to like working in groups with men, but I was also in school studying psychotherapy at the time, and was like just saw it in my future and still see it in my future. And then so I connected with Tom, and then he made this like really long, heartfelt Facebook post one day about just how powerful Everyman Group has been to him in the men's work, and that he really deeply, strongly urges all men who want to, explore this type of relationship really with other men, this kind of group work, to look into Everyman. He's like, there's probably a group in your city. So I did look in, and then I found the Toronto group, and they were just starting. And then so the first group I show up at was Matt Michaela was leading it, who we're both close with. And I honestly, it was like such a powerful experience, because he here was like the group facilitator, and when it came his time to do his share, he really went in and he got so vulnerable, and he shared some like such deep stuff. And a lot of it, me and him had a lot in common. Like I grew up skateboarding, he grew up BMXing, and with similar cultures. And after his share, it hit me so hard. And then I was like the last share maybe, or after him. I really went in, and I did like one of the deepest shares I've ever done about like, the challenges that I had faced in my life. And it was like very heartfelt. And so we had this really power, and everyone was just like, wow, dude, they're like, you brought it, like you're in, because it was my first time meeting with the group, right? And everyone was just like, and we all clicked right away. And I stayed in that group for over a year before I started my own group, right? Like kind of like a spinoff with a friend, Max, who also attended, and a number of friends, a few therapists. And I've just found this work so incredibly valuable. And there's something about, I work with clients one-on-one now, and that's great, but it's very different to be in a circle of peers and people who aren't necessarily paid to be there, people who aren't necessarily professionals even, but they're really just stepping up as human beings, as men, as human beings, to support one another, to be like, I'm here for you, and it's okay to feel what you're feeling. And so validating, so powerful, and it's so transformative. And nobody I know at least knows more about this work than you do. You lead the retreats, you've led many small groups, you've been in this for so long. And I was really, so I brought Jeff Warren, the meditation teacher that I'm close with and I often talk about. We went on the men's retreat together with you, and I brought a few other friends as well. And we were all so impressed about how deep we went in just one weekend, right? Because I'm used to meditation retreats, but that is just like, like full power and like all the prompts. And so I just really want to introduce people to this work, and to yourself and the work that you're doing, and how you're really activating people to continue this work, to training coaches and whatnot. And so, yeah, so thank you. First of all, thank you for starting that up. It had a huge impact on myself, and many other men I know have been deeply impacted by like your work specifically, and the work you've done. And so, yeah, it's an honor to have you here and to be talking about like what it is, like what, so I'm curious for you, what it's been like, what got you into this, and what you're finding is like, why is this so resonant with everybody?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'm going to answer that first. I'm just going to do my best to answer why is it so resonant. I believe it's so resonant because we are all in some way or another latent in our full expression of all the parts of ourselves, right? So we're kind of behind. It's hard to catch up and have any venue where we can be as much or of the capacity of who we are as possible, and to have that those conditions set where we're there with other human beings doing the same thing, and we make that agreement that we came here together to just let it all hang out and take all of the guards down piece by piece. It causes a chain reaction of like combustion. Honestly, it's like one fires, the other fires, and it's insanely compelling. It's insanely compelling. You mentioned the meditation retreats, and there's many different ways to get to our truth and expression of our truth. I think that what you're talking about, why is it so compelling, is because it's a short route and it fucking works. And I'll just a quick disclaimer. I'm one of the 4 co-founders of Every Man. I am now moving on and doing other things with my time, but I want to put a very strong plug in right up front, like for men to do that specific work of finding your emotions and your truth and sharing with other men. That is the place to go. So yeah, it's compelling because it works, and because it's fast, and because I actually think that I know from experience that the sort of the human connection that we're all pining for is so much closer at hand than we're aware of. Right? Like the actual expression of love, the full expression of all of these things that immediately bring us like right here in the moment as a person, fully connected with ourselves, other people, the world, and all. It's not that far away. It's not. I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound too simplistic, because it's a big barrier of fear, and there's a lot of things in the way. But if you get into the flow, the bunch of people who are just saying, "Hey, I'm willing to," quickly.
Sorry, it cut off right there. What was the very last thing you said?
Well, when you get enough people in the same boat going the same direction, saying I'm in for it, it goes fast.
Yeah.
Like you said, when you went to your first group and you heard one deep share from Matt, and all of a sudden you had permission, right? And you could just roll. And that was the ethos that we started the whole thing with, is lead by example. That was it. Like, and when we trained practitioners at the beginning, it's like, show up and get vulnerable.
Yeah.
And stop.
Yeah. And that's, it's like, I work with clients one-on-one every day, and sometimes I can get them there, but it's like so much more powerful. It's like not the thing in psychotherapy that the therapist then shares their most vulnerable things. In fact, that's like very much not allowed. And And so going into the men's group and being like, oh wow, like to give me permission, even when I was like, kind of facilitating the group or a participant, but like when there's sometimes I'm like, no, I'm not going to go there, and then the person before me, they go there, and then I'm like, that looked like it felt really good. It's like, I want that feeling, that cathartic, like being able to actually name these things and to see other people, being validated for their experiences and not shamed for them. And just the way it's held, that once people start get it, they get it very quickly, because you fall into that like group thing. So it's just like, it's just such powerful work. And so I'm really curious about like, what's your focus now then? Like, how are you, taking that, and like, because where do you go from there? Like, it was such powerful work, right?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's just been a lot of changes in my life over the last year. The COVID year has, like, I went in one end of the tunnel and came out the other in a very different place in many ways, and moved my family from the coast of California to the coast of Maine. Major professional transitions. Here are the things that I'm most interested and curious about. The first is I would say, well, one thing to name too, may be valuable for some listeners, is, I think more and more the core of my own practice and my own identity, whatever that means, is a Vajrayana Buddhist practice that I have, been involved in for about 10 or 12 years at this point. Mm-hmm. And I feel like in some ways, my addition and contribution to Everyman was an expression of that lineage in itself. And I'm a couple things. First, I'm interested in going more specifically in that direction. I'm stepping into a role as a meditation teacher. I've been a wilderness guide for the past 18 years. Putting those two together is actually kind of all I ever want to do. Like, I want to go sit and take people in the wilderness and, party that way. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing. So that's a little bit of like a distillation into even more simple core of what I have to offer, right? Another big thing that I'm working on is working with fathers specifically. And I find that I see an entryway or a door for more men to get into men's work, therapy, self-work, spiritual life, you name it, whatever you want. I feel like fatherhood offers an urgent, loud, giant, screaming, blinking sign that says, now. Now you have to do it now. You can't wait, because now it all filters down to your children, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm doing group programming for groups of fathers, and I'm building a platform that's a specifically growth community orientation for dads, and that's because that's what I am right now. I have two young kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old boy, and I need it. I want and need that community of fathers. And I feel like the lessons and all the lessons of all the men's work and all of everything I've ever done really comes together very powerfully. And I also think it says something very poignant about, I'm always thinking about impact too, like how this fucking crazy ass world that seems to be very, very not okay, like what would be the most leverageable impact to have. And the entire sort of patriarchal manhood masculinity mess that I think contributes centrally to a lot of our most pressing specific issues of misogyny and racism and environmental degradation. All of it, I think, really, like men in power, it's like time done, right? Like over with. So how do we transition off of that? And I think about like the role of father going forward as such a place of potential massive change on a very simple level. So we talk about your family and being like the the backstop to a bunch of old shit in your lineage, and you're like, okay, hey, I have the capacity and the time and some of the knowledge to be like, okay, I don't want that shit to go to my kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on the familial level, on the individual level, but then also the wider cultural level, I think it's a very important place to work. Lastly, I got a lot of stuff going on, but the other major thing I'm focusing on is building a community that takes principles of all this work, but it's not just for men, it's for everyone. Because, and that's actually what I'm maybe most, it's not true, I'm lit up about all of it, is that one of the things from the men's work and the men's group retreats that is so magical is that every single time I went through one, and I went all of them, was that every single man who was there, you could see their inherent, I call it perfection, call it beauty, call it contribution, whatever it is, like just like the real sacred beauty of every one of them came true. And I think that that process, that world offers us a way to simply and practically cut through difference so that we can sit down, men and women, black and white, name any difference, and we can use similar protocols and similar processes to do some very, very fucking necessary work, right? And so I'm doing some of that on the corporate level too.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, it's so true. The feeling on those retreats is like, it's like we're all here for this greater good, and there's this like kind of like noble quietness about, and that people really show up and they really meet each other in a really authentic way. And just even just like in passing, like when you have lunch with people, it's such and you intentionally create that space. And I'm also kind of curious, like the thing is, I studied at 3 different psychotherapy schools, and I studied, I'm just like an avid learner. I'm always learning about growth, and like that's it. It's like I'm obsessed. I'm reading everything from the existential stuff to the somatic stuff to the Buddhist stuff. And when I came on your retreat, I was like, wow, you guys go deep and you do it so well and so effectively. And it's like you just really refined and mastered it. And I'm curious, like how you could get in, like you teach people such simple and effective like methods, and they're honestly more effective than what I see a lot of psychotherapists doing out there. No, not to throw psychotherapists under the bus, but I think a lot of these, like, kind of, there's these newer modalities, like like relatively newer, like CBT and all these things that are like kind of help people cope, and I think they have their place. That's extremely important and valuable. But to bring people into those depths, there's just something in there, and you do it so well. And it's like I'm really curious about that, like about
Well, the first obvious answer, specifically since you came to an everyman retreat, is Owen Marcus, my mentor and co-founder. He truly distilled a deeply, deeply effective and power somatic and emotional process, man. And he developed it over, decades and decades and decades. And he studied with Peter Levine of SE, and he studied with Ron Kurtz of Hakomi. And you should totally interview him and detail, because you can nerd out. I'll speak about it for myself though. And I believe 2 things. I had a few initiations in my life that I think prepared me to be able to wield that space pretty masterfully. The first was, a 4 or 5 year run of wilderness time when I was a wilderness therapy guide. And I think for me, the biggest operating principle of doing that work well is that of surrender, the capacity to surrender. And we could spend an hour talking about what that meant. But literally living in the wilds, the backcountry for that much time, probably a couple thousand days altogether, right? plus being in a therapeutic environment 24 hours a day for those days, right? So it's like and in a role which was that of guide and big brother, and like just gotta fucking be with the shit no matter what. There's no exiting, right? There's no appointment, you know. I went through the ringer, you know. I went through the ringer. You name it, it occurred. That was one huge initiation. The second huge initiation was when I was 28. I went to Peru and sat through a number of ayahuasca ceremonies, and then to put it in layman's terms, I tripped for about a year.
Right.
Didn't come out of the experience, and either never did or got used to it. Either never did and got used to it, or I came out of it after about a year. One of those is true. And that was like, if the wilderness was like an undergraduate level of surrender, that was the master's or PhD in surrender, right? And so I feel like that gave me the capacity to not close down around pretty much fucking anything. You know, that's not, I mean, that's not true. Like there's plenty of places I can close down, but in that context, as a facilitator, as a guide, I've been through a lot. Now I think, you know, and then my meditation practice also factors in there, but again, to give Owen the credit where it's due, the specific protocol of showing up. And I mean, I think it's all about creating safety. That's what it comes down to, like actively knowing how to create the visceral felt feeling of safety in other people. And I mean, I'm not going to throw clinicians under the bus either, and I would never do that. I you know, still hire clinicians and therapists all the time. But when I was in the wilderness, and you know, I would be out there for weeks at a time with these kids, and then once a week a clinician would come out and spend an hour with them and run them through some fucking bullshit. You know, is what it felt like. It's like the extraction of reality that I saw and felt occur in those moments was like, this is weird. You know. And so I think like my background has kind of been a no holds barred one, where I got to sort of just sit and steep in I don't know, I didn't have any rules, you know. And that ability to just be with other people, to just be with them, that is that creates safety. And that's a metaphysical, energetic, physical, somatic, emotional, mental whole game, right? But the cool thing is it can be trained, and actually trained pretty effectively. You know?
I mean, I'm in the midst of the training right now, you know, and it's also have the recognition that I still have like you know, a ways to go, but it's also seeing like how far I've come, right? And it's like having, you know, had experiences with people like you and a number of others. Like I could see, it's like to really, there is this something that's kind of ineffable, that there's this deep presence and that safety that comes with that deep presence, that you know, the facilitator knows everything is going to be okay, everything is okay right here. And that's really where the power is. And I think even like Carl Rogers, the, you know, famous like humanistic therapist, would agree with all of this, and he would be right. You know, I think he was in a different time before the whole somatic kind of things came into play, but I think it's like, it's very much in that lineage, right? That like these are human beings and we have to relate to them on this human level. And so I'm curious, so how are you taking all these skills now into these new projects? Like what is this looking like? You know, how there's so much going on.
I mean, from today, just from earlier today. So I have a program with my teaching partner, Cherie Healy, and it's called Together. And it's just it's a 3-month experience. And the point of it is to step into yourself, right? I think to activate whatever's latent in every person. And bringing it into that it's really beautifully simple. Like, we can have a theme or a topic to teach about, but really, again, it comes down to being that level. Actually, I want to put this in here because I think this is really important. I say this all the time and I mean it. Like, all it kind of takes to get into that sort of state of connection or safety where things start to flow with others is a willingness, right? Like, that's a really incredibly important component. It's just a willingness. Like, okay, I will go there. But that willingness has to be met with some sort of trustable force, right? And so in these groups that are co-ed, and people from all over the world and all kinds of backgrounds, and so it's not just a men's space. It does seem like there's maybe a little bit longer hesitation, a little bit more time, but that's cool and that's great. And we just sort of take our time building the community. So today we had our 5th call in the whole course, and it was that moment. It all came together, and all of a sudden this group of 24 people that was doing good stuff together, all of a sudden the entire thing came to life. It's just like this. It is now this living entity in itself, and it was just so affirming and beautiful and generative. And I think it's the type of thing that you don't forget, right? It's crazy, like this level of authenticity we're talking about. You don't forget it. And it's the same thing that calls us out. So for the meditators here too, I think about it in the term transmission, right? So when there's a teaching, there's a transmission as well. I think what in terms of both the men's work with Everyman, but now what I'm doing in these other projects is being aware of that level of communication, but also just being very blunt and simplistic and explicit about it. Like, so I don't know, I completely lost the thread.
Well, so I mean, even what you're just saying, what I thought of is like, so I'm somebody who by nature, like, I don't push people, right? I'm like very warm and inviting, and I'm just like, hey, it's okay, like, on your own time, like, trying to help them, like, not judge themselves so harshly and have more compassion. But then there is also this way to push people in a compassionate way, right? To really challenge them. And I feel like you and Everyman in general, like, that is it. They have such power in both of those, right? That there's this this force in, like, this deep compassion, knowing you're super held, and knowing that you're being pushed because they actually care about you, because they want to see you do better, they want to see you feel better. And so it's like and it's like you really embody that. And just thinking of the power of these group works, that the one that you're speaking of, it's like when you get to that point, and I've been in many different groups where you just feel a shift one day, and it's actually magic, and they could actually feel this, like, love for everyone in the group, and even the people who were annoying me the day before, and you're just like, oh, now I kind of love that person, and you're like, what's up with that? So the group work is so powerful. But something else I wanted to get talk about is the fatherhood thing that you kind of mentioned earlier. And I'm not yet a father, but I definitely see that in my future. And I'm curious about what that, like, how that has impacted you, and how you're then sharing that and help other fathers.
Well, the impact was immediate. It woke me up out of my slumber, and actually it was the thing that pushed me forward. It was my first son was born in 2016, and 4 months later, we did our first, it wasn't even called Everyman then, but we did the first retreat, and that's what kicked it off. And it literally was a clear push inside of me that I'd been sitting on this knowledge and of this call. I had this call for half a dozen years before, even longer, actually, ever since I did the wilderness work. I knew I had to do this work. Like, it was very obvious, and I was terrified. I was fucking terrified. And so he came out, and it was just like, all right, dude, you have to do this now, right? It's just like, no question about it. It has propelled me into growth, maturity, messy, good, bad, all of the things like nothing else has. And it's one of those, this is an ineffable thing, but I actually would like to spend time, not right now, really trying to name what happens, because it is a completely huge shift. And what I see in general is men's hearts being wrenched open by the cascade of neurochemicals and bonding that happens with kids, and that just changes things. And so I think it offers an opportunity for growth. It offers an opportunity to capitalize on that organic maturation that is in process. And it's also becomes very, very, very necessary to get your shit together very quickly, right? Lingering bullshit starts to fester and be a really big problem. So no matter what area of your life that is, as a dad, like if you're not making enough money, that becomes a real fucking problem. If you're emotionally not all together, that becomes a big problem. If you're abusing, any drugs or whatever, it's like, it just gets magnified. It's a time of magnification, right? And so, right now I have a group of 10 dads who stepped into a 6-month training together, and it's not a training, it's healing. So we're deeply focusing on, it's like, anything that hasn't been healed yet, let's just get after it, right? Let's go do this. And the intention here is to experientially explore what an emerging paradigm of fatherhood might be. One that would be really supportive of a healthy planet, healthy families, and all that. And so there's that. It is an experiment, right? And it's exploration. And but I find it so wildly meaningful. And this goes back to the very first experiences I had in the wilderness. So really, what kicked this entire calling and obsession off for me was doing these trips in the wilderness, specifically when we had kids in the woods, and then their dads would hike in for a week, father-son week, and then what occurred there, what didn't occur there, and what occurred there. So like, just noticing the wild gap between the ability. You could almost watch it as a dad walked in closer and closer to son. You could see their inner defenses get stronger and stronger, and all of a sudden they're there to give a hug, and they're just fucked, right? Like, they didn't know how to love them, they didn't know how to talk, they didn't know how to give support. Like, it's just, God damn, well, there's the whole fucking problem right there, right? And so, and then on the converse side, when a father and son, like, picture being around the fire, 3 dads and their sons, big old dude awesome therapist with the beard, and me. And then all of a sudden you see one of these 18-year-old like thugs bawling in his father's arms, being held and cradled, and both of them exclaiming how much they truly miss and love each other. And it is so poignantly powerful.
Yeah, it's on the Everyman retreat I went on, there was an experience like that, and I a father and son really, confronting each other. The father calling out, and admitting to, not always being there for his son and feeling really bad about it. And when they met and hugged, I don't think there's at least 60 men in the room. Every single guy was crying. Every single one. We were all crying, and it was just like holy shit. It's like it shows that not only is that work powerful, but it can be done. Like, it's available. And so it's like, we need more hands on deck. And I know that this is what you're also doing. You're doing trainings, right? Like, coaching men to do this stuff. And I'm really curious, because like, what is, like, how has that process been to like teach men to be facilitators?
Yeah, to clarify that what I'm doing is I have a mastermind and training for men's coaches, for existing professional coaches that work with men primarily. I mean, it's brilliant. It's a perfect endeavor for me right at this point. It's a way that I can funnel this passion in and I guess amplify impact. Right, if I can help 20 coaches do really great work, then I think that's really valuable. But there's something I want to name that, which is important to me and is part of what I'm doing with those coaches too, is also taking it very seriously as a business and taking the time to really look at things from that perspective, as well as a practice. So it's both a practitioner training, but also a business mastermind, right? And so I name that because it's important in all of these things. I guess where I've gone in the past chunk of time thematically is really, really, really getting precise about the integration of call it masculine, feminine, call it the river and the riverbanks, call it whatever it is, but finding a very, very clear and powerful sort of combination, or actually just naming things as different skills, right? Like the capacity to open up and be vulnerable and connected is one skill. The capacity to get clear and go kick some fucking ass is another one. And I think a lot of us are spending time part way in and sort of like feeling the stress of not having one or other. So this program with practitioners, I'm honestly at this point most excited about helping elevate that profession as to something where people living doing it and actually contribute to others for a long time, because coaching is a squirrely space anyway. Less so and less so, and depending, that might not be true anymore in a lot of ways. But I coach on the corporate level, I coach on the personal level, and now on the practitioner level, and this idea of integration and separating different sort of energetic stances is really what I'm mostly focused on these days.
I think that's an issue with the coaching is like, so in like different types of professions, there's like the regulatory bodies and the schools, for better or worse, because a lot of them have become really kind of lacking. They're not very progressive, you could say, or they're slow to integrate newer stuff, like somatic psychology and practices are only starting to really get integrated now into like more mainstream style psychology educations. And so it's we need more people, the coaching space like that, to go through that process of schooling for like that type of profession is a lot. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of money. It's also that you have to be like, for most of the programs, like academically oriented. You have to be writing papers and whatnot. But when you're actually in the profession, you're not writing papers. And so it's like it doesn't make sense, right? It's like I encounter so often people who would be excellent therapists or excellent coaches who just don't have the resources or the skills to make it in that kind of world, in the academic kind of schooling world. And it's just such a shame. And it's like they want to help and they could be excellent at helping. And so I think that there is this huge demand for more expertise and more kind of leadership in the coaching world for people to actually be trusted and be like, no, these are the actual good coaches. Because as you're aware, it's like everybody's selling themselves as the best coach in the world, but you don't know. We're like, you don't know. And I'm deeply skeptical of all of them, right? And so it's like, and I've been pleasantly surprised a few times when I met some coaches who have been really, really knew their stuff and really were going really deep with the clients. But I've equally as many times I've been really like let down to see what they're really, the way that they're leading people into that kind of like a positive, like manifesting kind of world that really isn't looking at their shit, And so I just like, I think it's great. And I really hope to see that like that these types of coaching things that you're doing, because I think that you're one of the, you know, great people to be leading these things, that these can really spread, and there could be more like maybe accountability or something that people can see, like, oh, this guy will actually help you do real healing work, and not just try to make you feel better about yourself on like a short-term kind of, you know, one-time thing.
No, 100%. And it's a good, I think it's a good tension though, right? I mean, it's you need to have the established, you know, status quo practices that are regulated and all of that. And I mean, just think of the value that brings. You take any school of psychology that has a practice orientation, and over time, like, it just churns value, right?
Yeah.
Changes people's lives. And then I think, like, you know, there's just something about, if we could really zoom out and see the timeline, it probably wouldn't seem as dramatic, right? It's just, there's scouts out in the wilderness, like, doing some new shit that for whatever reason, you know, isn't ensconced in that cornered off garden of that one, you know, rigid, I shouldn't even say, see, I have bias here, right? So it comes out, but I think there's immense value in both. And I think that's kind of one of the benefits today, these days, right? You can get a coach doing some crazy ass shit that works really well. You can go get yourself a clinician that's been practicing for 30 years and is going to deliver you a lot of value. You can fucking go do a bunch of, you know, whatever. There's a lot of options, right? So it's the age of trusting yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Find your own path.
Right. And it's really like empowering people. Like, you know, I've introduced a lot of people into like certain things that because when it's a new world, it's like you don't know who to trust. And so that thing of like finding one person who can help orient you in that world and be like, these are the, you know, I think that's really valuable. So hopefully we're doing that today and helping to orient some people and empower them to trust themselves and to really explore the different avenues for their own growth and healing. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on the nature meditation stuff, because that's like, so I've been down here in Costa Rica for the last 4 months, and it's been a nature meditation while I've been here. You know, I'm not in a beach town at all. I'm not in a touristy area. I'm living like in an isolated valley, really, like, just with nature. Like, that's like the theme. And then I have my space to do my work and whatnot. And I just, it's been becoming more and more clear of like how essential this is to our collective well-being, is like our connection with nature. It's so deeply essential. And I grew up in a city. I was so disconnected. You know, I was a skateboarder, like kind of like city kid. And it's like, it's such a privilege to be able to get out of here, because I know a lot of friends who can't get out of the city to be able to connect. So how are you finding the work, and what's your kind of experience been?
Yeah, I was just reading some accounts of, you know, practitioners 1,000 years ago who would take their village up to, you know, fall retreat, and all of these stories that really resonated with me. That's in the front of my mind. My biggest love affair my entire life is with the experience of how it feels to be slowed down and just viscerally, you know, feet on the earth. I think I lovingly call myself a dirt worshiper, right? Like, and it's so strong. So I'll tell one quick story, which I think maybe is the best, quickest pointed thing I can share. So I did all that time out in the wilderness in my early 20s, and then I moved to New York City to get a master's, and really just fucked myself up pretty bad. Like, just got all twisted up in a lot of ways. And then getting myself fucked up was the impetus to find my first men's group, therapist, meditation. Like, everything started from that, being fucked up. And the first time I went into a practice session, it was close to Union Square, New York City. And it was like a 3-hour meditation thing on a Saturday morning, Dharma Ocean. So this somatic orientation, which I've been with ever since. The the first thing I ever did is we were instructed to lay down on yoga mats and put our knees up, tie them up with a yoga strap, and then they guided us in a practice to release down into the earth, basically an earth descent practice. And I sat up from that 40 minutes later like a fucking puddle of tears, just like I wept and wept and wept and wept, because I found myself, I had not known the power of like laying on the earth out on the dirt. And so I found myself in New York City remembering how it felt, and I found a way that I could feel how I used to feel in the wilderness. And it was just this overwhelming, like, holy shit moment. Like I can open myself, my nervous system, to that same level of generative groundedness and depth and connection, but I can do it right here in the fucking city. And it was just like changed everything, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I'm interested in myself is taking people out in the woods, because it's fucking wild and fun, and doing some of these same somatic practices on the ground in the woods, slowing down. And actually, I think you may get this, is that some of the same basic principles that like everyman uses, you apply them to nature, or you apply them to sort of connecting with just being outside. And I think there's like a potential escalation or acceleration of the impact of nature. And so it's one of these transmission things. Once you get it in your body, you get it in your body, and then you can find that place again. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a selfish vision, man, but like eventually I don't think I'm going to do anything but sit out in nature and have people come meditate with me. That's probably where I'm headed. So
I feel you. It's yeah, I can see myself going that way as well right now. It's definitely, and hopefully I think that like that it reorients your whole value system when you're out in nature for a long time. You realize what's really important and what's not important. And it's like, it's just so silly how lost we can get and then how clear it can be. It's like, oh, it's actually just, like all the lessons are there in nature, just like the life and the death. It's like, you don't have a tree trying to be famous or anything. It's just happy being a tree,
You said it, things actually die. And things are actually really alive with no breaks, right? Yeah. And like that's pretty pretty profound.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining. Any closing thoughts, or just if you have like just one like little piece of advice for like men beginning men's work, or men curious about getting into that world, what would it be?
I mean, if you want the emotional thing that we were talking about at the beginning, go to Everyman. I mean, don't mess around. That's where it's at. If you're not ready to join something or do something big like that, I would say find a compelling anything that gets you into your body or feels like a potential, opening into stuff. So what is breath work or whatever the fuck, right? Just whatever level of woo you're open to, just do it.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I've been walking barefoot. That's been my woo thing through the nature, right? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for coming here. And I'll post in the description for like links to your various things, but if you just want to shout them out again right now.
Yeah, my website's dandoty.com. Pretty straightforward. Instagram, I'm trying to get Dan Doty, but it's Daniel Doty. That's really all you need. Everything's there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, man.
All right. Okay, thank you so much for watching. If you liked this interview, please like it, subscribe, leave a comment. If you want to reach out to Dan or see what he's doing, I would highly advise checking out his website. And if you want to see more content like this, or more content like I normally do around guiding practices and meditation and growth, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you again soon.